Hi guys, welcome to the channel. It's Abipro, and in this video I'll be talking about Trendline and how you can use Trendline to trade in the crypto and the forex market. So this video is going to be it's not going to be a very long one because I'll just be breaking down to you how you can use Trendline like a pro trader. So if you like content like this, content on how to make money from the crypto forex market, technical analysis, ensure you subscribe to the channel. And also give this video a thumbs up if you get some values from it. So let's get right into it. So Trendline strategy, how you can use Trendline to trade the financial market, whether it is forex, crypto, or even stock market. So first thing first, what is Trendline? Trendlines are actually some lines. There are some lines drawn on your chart that connect the swing highs and the swing lows during a trending market. So you have to understand that trend lines can only be found in a trending market, whether it's an uptrend or a downtrend. So if the market is not trending, then you don't have a business drawing a trend line. So if the market is choppy, the market is moving up and down choppy, you don't have a business drawing a trend line, right? And also it has to connect the swing highs and the swing lows on the chart. So it means it has to connect a plate that is high on the moving trend with a plate that is low on the moving trend, right? That is the second thing. And also it has to be in the trending market. So why do we draw trend lines? It's very important to know. Why do we draw trend line? Is it a must to draw trend line? No, it's actually not a must. You only draw trend lines when you have opportunities to draw trend lines. Trend line is not something you force. It's not something you must have on your chart. But when you have it, when you have opportunity to draw it, it actually serves as an additional conference for you to be able to trade in the financial market. So now, what do you draw trend line? Trend line can actually act as a support and resistance. So in an uptrend market, trend line acts as a support, and if the market is in the downtrend, trend line acts as a resistance, because the market is in an uptrend, you want to be buying. So when the market comes to the area of trend line, you look for opportunities to buy because it's actually a support area. And also, if you're in a downtrend and market comes to the trend line area, you look for opportunity to sell because it acts as a resistance in a downtrending market, right? So, and also trend line, a break of trend line can also signal a possible trend reversal. So for example, like in this kind of chart, you see that this chart is actually in an uptrend. Looking at this particular trend line I have drawn, the market is an uptrend at this point, and when the trend line broke, actually at this point it broke, then come back to it. It tested the trend line here, come back, and it broke here, signaling a possible trend reversal. So this is like the market is not directing an uptrend again at this point, and there is high probability that the market starts going downtrend from this place, except this support does not hold, right? So that is actually what trend line does in your chart. But the reality of trend line is that you don't force it. You have to understand that you don't force trend line. If it is there, it is there. If it is not there, it is not there. And also, you don't just enter whenever market comes to a trend line. You need to pair trend line with other price action factors and confluences. So because you see a trend line does not mean, okay, right, this is a trend line, and it does not mean that automatically whenever the market comes to this trend line, it must hold. So for example, let's look at this particular trend line. This is an area the market went up, came back to this trend line, and the trend line holds support, right? The market goes up again, come back to this area of trend line, goes up again, came back to the trend line, holds, goes up, came back all this place, holds up, holds, then came back again. And at this point, right, the trend line still held, went up, came back and held, went up, and at this point it broke the trend line and the market reversed. So now you have to understand that even though trend line might keep holding, there must be a point where the trend line is going to break and you are going to look opportunity. So don't just enter the market at the trend line and say, okay, it's now at the trend line, I'm going to buy or I'm going to sell immediately. No, you have to combine trend line with some other confluences and other price action factors that you have to look at in the chart. So this is like this document, this image is like an example of trend line, right? And you can see that in this particular point, trend line has, whenever the market comes to this trend line here, it's retested, again here it retested, again here it retested, again here it retested, and at this point, at this point, right, it is actually a retest and opportunity. It's a retest opportunity that market might likely go up, but then it broke, right, and started going down. So that is actually what a trend line is. So this is actually a trend line on the Euro USD, and I'm actually going to also look at another chart on let's look at another trend line opportunity on the USD card. So let's switch to the USD card chart. Guys, this is the USD card chart on a 4-hour time frame, and what we have here is a trend line, right? And if you look at this chart very well, you will see that this particular trend line has been holding since 8th of January 2024 and up till this time I'm recording, which is like the 1st of July 2024. So this trend line has been holding for 6 months, and what we see is that whenever the price comes to this trend line, right, this is 8th of January or 5th of January, right? So the price come to this trend line, it held, price bounced, came back, bounced again, came up, bounced again, and the market continued higher around this level. So at this point, the market came back to the trend line again, and it held, came back to it, it held. Market came back to it, it made a fake out, which is like a breakout. But if you see this chart, if you do this chart, you see that this particular point is an area of support. So this is one of the high probability trend line that I used to talk about. So this is actually a high probability trend line at this point because the trend line has a confluence with an area of support, right? This is an area. So let me get rid of all these lines. So this is actually an area of support. So the trend line has come at an area of support where a lot of buyers will want to come. So there is high probability that this trend line continues. So that is actually an example of trend line, and it is easy to do. Also, you can also have a trend line in a downtrend, right? This is also an example of trend line in this chart that I drew back then, right, in 2022 and stuff like that. So also for a market that is trending downwards, you can actually have a trend line for a market that is trending downward too. This is like an example of a trend line for a market that is trending down. For this market at this point, it was actually trending down, and that's it now. So now let's talk about how to draw a proper trend line. So now you actually need a minimum of 2 touches to be able to get a trend line. And if you look at this trend line, you see we have a minimum of 2 touches before trend line broke here. But I will prefer to use this particular example of trend line. You need a minimum of 2 touches. You see on this trend line we have 1 touch here, another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So in this market, in this chart, we have 7 touches. So for any trend line to be valid, the market must connect at least 2 points in the chart. Also, you have to understand that trend lines are not always smooth, because trends are not always smooth. You see that at this point, there are some places in this chart that the trend lines, the market does not touch the trend line. It doesn't mean that they are not valid. It only means that, the market movements are not always perfect. Even if you want to draw a trend line, you see that some will be a little bit, some will slip down a little bit. It doesn't still mean they are not trend lines. So trend lines are not always perfect. Don't look for perfect opportunities. So always treat trend lines as areas on your chart. So that is why sometimes you see some people draw a trend line and they can just connect another area like this, and they treat it as an area. So I always tell my students anytime I teach that you draw areas. If you are doing trend lines, support and resistance, all these patterns, you always treat them as an area, because they are areas and not a straight line. The market does not always move in a straight line or a perfect straight line. So, alright, treat trend lines as an area on your chart. Trends are not always smooth. They are not always perfect. They are always choppy, because the market is always choppy. Alright, the next thing is that you don't force trend lines in the chart. You only treat trend lines whenever you are able to see them. So that is how to draw a trend line. So whenever you're drawing a trend line, you need the trend line tool, right, to draw a perfect trend line. So this is a trend line tool, right, on your trading view. You click on trend line view and you move it from down to up, right? I usually move the trend line from the lowest point so that I'll be able to get accurate, like reasonably accurate ones. I don't start drawing the trend line from this place to this place. I draw from the lowest point to the highest point. So, and if I want to draw trend line for a downtrend, for example, I draw from the lowest point to the highest point. The reason why I do it because the lowest points at this particular time is actually the place where you want to be trading from. It's actually the place you are watching. So let's assume that the market is currently here. You want to be watching the market from this point because this is where the market is at that particular time. So that is actually how I draw my trend line. So I make sure I have at least 2 touches, and the more touches the trend line has, the better that particular trend line. So how do you trade a trend line? Let's talk about how to trade the line. There are practically 2 ways to trade a trend line. We have trend trading or trend line bounce. I call it trend trading or trend line bounce because whenever market comes to the trend line is telling you the market is in a particular trend. So this market is actually in an uptrend because we have series of higher highs, higher lows, higher highs, higher lows, and higher highs and higher lows. So trend trading or trend line bounce means whenever market comes to the trend line, you expect that the market is going to bounce, just like it happens here. You see, market comes to the trend line, it bounced, and the market goes up, right? Come to the trend line again, it bounces, comes again, it bounces, comes again, bounce, and like that, right? So I trade the trend line bounce. And the second strategy, the second way to trade trend line is the trend line breaks. And that is whenever the market comes to trend line, there is actually going to be a particular point in time the trend line will break and there will be a trend reversal from an uptrend to a downtrend. So at this particular point, the market has been respecting the trend line, and whenever the market comes to the trend line, I expect it to bounce, but I don't just enter the market immediately at the trend line. I look for some opportunities for the market to bounce. So now, one of the opportunities I look for is I look for a trend line to be at areas of value. So if the trend line has a confluence with an area of value, just like it does in this particular area, I'm looking for an opportunity for the trend line to bounce. So at this point, I can spot some long wick candles signifying that even though the market has been pushed from this place, is going down from this place, and it has now gotten to a trend line, and I can now see that the market is being rejected and there is high probability that this trend line is going to hold. So now what I do is just scale to the lower time frame, right? What I do is just scale to the lower time frame and maybe probably 30-minute time frame and look for entry opportunities at this point. So all I have to do on this lower time frame is that I could get a counter trend, right, and put it here. So once the market breaks this counter trend, let's look at it. Once the market breaks out of this counter trend, probably do a reversal, a pull back into this area, then I take a long trade and I target this particular high. So, and that is actually if I'm day trading or scalping, right? So I target this particular high. The reason why I target this place for a first is that most of the time when I take my trade, I target the next area of support or resistance, because if you're a trader, you should be trading from one level to another, because that's actually how the market moves. So whenever I want to take my entries, I actually look into areas of value and I scale to the lower time frame. I made a video on how to enter the market and how to exit. I'm going to put that video in the description below, so make sure you watch that so that you get my entry strategies and how I enter the market. But the bone of contention for this particular tutorial is trend lines and actually how to trade them, and that is what I talk about now. Just how to trade the bounce of trend line. You look for opportunity to trade them at this area of value, maybe candlestick patterns, that's formation that you use, or maybe confluence with areas of values, or maybe chart patterns that form around that area of value. So right, that is actually how to trade the trend line bounce. So how do you trade the trend line break? This is a chart of Euro NZD, Euro against the New Zealand dollar, and you would see this particular trend line, right? It has been respecting for a very long time, and at this point there is a break of the trend line. So that is the second way you can trade the trend line. You trade the trend line break. Whenever the trend line breaks, it usually signifies the movement, the change in the trend or the direction of the market from a downtrend to an uptrend, or from an uptrend to a downtrend. So now the market has been an uptrend for a long, and at this point, the trend line break. So one of the major strategies I use to train the trend line break is the break and retest strategy. So I'm actually going to make another video on break and retest strategy. That's going to be a full video, but the bone of contention is that when the market broke the trend line at this point, it didn't just break and start moving. It retested this trend line. So most of the time, whenever the market breaks trend line, I always wait for the market to go back to the trend line and retest. So once the market goes back to the trend line and gives me a retest, I take a short trade from the retest area. So at this particular point, I'm just going to be taking a short position from this point. I'll put my stop loss just a little bit above the trend line, just in case it's a fake out. And also, I look for the next area of value on the chart, which is like the place where, this was a double bottom and there's a neckline here. That's actually where I'm going to be putting my first target, right? And that's what I'll be trading from. That's pretty much how I trade trend line break strategy. So, but when the trend line breaks, I always wait for a retest, unless the trend line breaks with a very big momentum candle, with a very strong momentum in the market. So if it breaks a very big momentum candle, let's say it breaks with a candle like this, I might take an aggressive sell immediately after the break, right? But if it doesn't, I always wait for a retest back into the area of trend line just to confirm that it's actually a real breakout and not a fake out. And from that, I trade it. So if you got value from this video, ensure you subscribe to the channel, you hit the like button, and I'll see you in another one.